Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is episode 26 in my garage build series. So today I'm going to be going over a little bit about the steel siding that I put on the garage. A lot of it I wasn't able to show just because it was during the winter time, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but I'll show you a little bit in this video. So it's been a little while since I have been shooting some footage, so quite a bit has changed. I do apologize. I'm going to rush through the steel siding part of it a little bit just because it was during the winter when it was hit and miss, so I couldn't really set up the camera the best to do it. And it was just a bitter cold winter, long winter. It was about 6 months of winter. And so I did this in bits and pieces, and I was trying to look back at what footage I had shot last, and I think it was doing the soffit. Now, I didn't do the fascia on the ends yet because I was waiting until I did these big, long siding pieces. And I just did this today. So during the winter, I did this side. And usually what I do is kind of like the roof, which a lot of the stuff I had showed on the roof applies to this as well. So what I like to do on the sides like this, these are the easiest because I was able to measure and this was all accurately the same. So I ordered it just a little bit, like 3/8 or so less than what the overall length is. Like from the base trim down here to underneath into the J channel, you want to have a little bit of room. And so, you know, whether you go a quarter or 3/8, that J channel is an inch. So as long as you're up in there a ways, you don't have to be perfectly tight. And you want to leave a little bit of room just for expansion and stuff. But what I did is I put these all in a stack and then I pre-drilled them all. I marked them out so it's evenly spaced. You can just kind of do what you want as far as spacing goes. Since my walls are solid sheeting of plywood all the way, I used the big fat screws, which I can show you them later. 1 inch is the shortest I could get, but they're the big 5/16 head, and they bite really well into sheeting. So since there's not 2x4 nailers in there, or purlins, whatever you want to call them, then I can do whatever I want for spacing. So I thought, well, I probably could have gotten away with 3 rows of screw in the field there. I could have spaced them a little bigger, but I decided I got lots of screws. I'm just going to space them a little closer. So I think they're about 28 inches apart is what it came out to. So I could have probably gone like 32 or maybe 34 and done less, but I thought that worked out good. So you can play around with that. So that's just to kind of show you how that came out. I have the base trim on the bottom and how this comes out with my foam board. Remember that insulation board that I did if you've been along in this series? This hangs over that, this flat part right here. It's been through the winter, so it's got some debris on there. And then I still have to put gravel in here. Still have to fill that up within a couple inches of that. I don't want to fill it completely full because I get a lot of snow. But it held up really good during the winter, everything with this. So I'm really liking this. Get it perfect, but I tried to get where it's like angled at a 45 like that. And I can try to show you a little bit of how I did that when I go up top to a piece of J channel that's not done yet. So I did that instead of just doing the butt and pass method, which is common longer ago. But I think a lot more people are doing these 45 degrees. And I really like them. Really like how it comes together. It does take a little more thinking how to do it. But so I did all except for this end right here. So do you remember my backhoe? And of course this really handy setup that I have with the platform, that really helped out, and then a step ladder on top of that. It's actually really stable to get up there, and it really cuts down on the height up there, so I feel a lot safer. So getting these 2 sheets in the middle is the hardest part, because what I'm doing, I started at the very peak up there and drew a level line and checked level in the center of my window, center of my door, and everything checks out perfectly center, so that's great. I'm really happy. I think I did that when I set the window and door. I can't remember for sure, but I must have placed them center somehow, so that worked out great. So that's what I did for starting with this. The sides, like I said, are easy because they're just all the same length. You can just run them. The windows are the trickiest part. So what I did then, to get my overall length, say on this big one, I'll just give you an example of what I'm doing right now, is I measured, since there's no base trim directly underneath the center here, where I need to get my long point measurement, I measured what it is on either side of the window, and it's the same up to there. Tight is 81, for example, and then I just measured from there all the way up to the peak and added the 2 measurements together. That gives me my long point measurement. And then I got measurements all over here, 81 and 3/8. So I usually give myself a little bit of room in the J channel, like when I measure.
So if I'm measuring up from the base trim, I always reference off of that for when I'm going to cut my piece. So I come up usually at least a quarter, sometimes a 3/8 if it's these big pieces to give myself a little bit of room. But you want to keep it up off the bottom a little so it can drain in here, because the leaves and all that stuff get in there sometimes. We have the large needles that get in everything. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. This is my center line, like I said, for my long point measurement. And then actually it's going to come out pretty good where it's going to come in tight. I actually have to trim a little bit off of the sheet to go in here. So it's going to be a long wobbly piece because this is going to be cut out of it. So I learned from the backside what I didn't want to do. And so I'll reference to that in a bit. But right here is my level line. Not that one. That's an old line of some kind. But I made a mark here on the window when I was measuring it. And you can just rub them off when you're done. But this is going to be the center of my rib when I put this on. And now this J-channel, I found out on the back window back there on the back side that it's easier to leave the J-channel just loose. I put a nail in just to hold it to make sure it's all going to fit. And then I'm going to pull that whole J-channel off and then get these sheets up in place, because it's really hard with the roof angling this way and this way to get the sheet, especially that overlaps. That's the hard part. So I'm going to leave this J-channel loose for now because I'm going to pull it off. I made sure that it all fit. This is just sitting here. But when you're getting your sheet up in here, because it's got to tuck up in that J-channel, and it's also got to tuck in behind here. So I found out that it's easier to just leave this J-channel loose, and then once the sheet is in here in place, just leave it as loose as you can. I put like a screw in the top, screw in the bottom, keep it in place. And then you can flex these sheets out a little, and you can get all this J-channel put in. But one other thought, I've done this before too, especially when you're going this way. See, I wanted to start in the center, but then by doing that, this whole side is going to have to tuck underneath each sheet because I'm lapping it this way, going this way. So this one, the sheets will lap over top, and then this way, I'll have to tuck them underneath, which it's not too bad to do, but when you're in a situation like this, it can be a little tricky. The hardest part's going to be these two long sheets because they're going to go all the way down. Once you get into above the garage door here, since I have a J-channel down there, not a base trim, I can lift it up off there a quarter, and I can stay out of even down here like a 1/2 inch down on this one, on the top sometimes. Usually what I do when I measure up at an 8/12, if this is my long point right here, I add a 1/2 inch. So I actually end up being right about in there with this. And that just gives you a little bit of flexibility to get it in here. And I have to tuck this one in under. I know this is a lot of rambling, but hopefully it makes sense to you. But what I was going to say about that is if you had to, you could pull this J-channel loose, a section loose. You know, I have it all nailed on there, but you could pull it loose, and then once you get 3 or 4 sheets up in here, you could start down there and slide that J-channel back up here before you put any screws in, and then just screw through it. You know, so I've done that before sometimes, but this seems to be working out pretty well the way I did the backside, and I think I can do it with leaving this in place. So I'm hopeful of that. Okay, so I wanted to talk about my J-channel a little bit. There's probably a lot better videos about this, covering this. If I find some, I'll link them down below in the description of the video. You can find them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this J-channel apart and kind of reverse engineer it for you to show you how I did it. So this is the top piece, and this probably won't make a whole lot of sense at the moment, but you see how these tabs here stick up an inch higher than this, because this is an inch wide, this J-channel. So what I do, we'll go back down to the bottom. Okay, so this will show it. See how this one has the cut on it like that, the angled cut. So I'll leave this in place now to show you a little bit. So this bottom one, so in my example, this window is 35.5, and then I want to add an inch overall length on the face here on either side. So this piece here I made 37.5, and then I cut back an inch back so that way it's open right to there, as you can see that. And I bend that tab off and completely break it off. And then I have some flat pliers that I sometimes bend this if it's a little bit of a burr there. It just makes it a little easier. But then that's where I cut the face. But I cut this 1.5 inches past so that it lines up with the width of this. So if that makes sense there. So I do that on both sides. And then on the bottom of the next one, so this is the right side. So my long point is now from the top of the window up there to this part right here. And then, so then this gets cut at a 45. And right where this 45 stops back here, then I bend this. This is an inch long. And I get that bent up like that. And then also when I cut this right here, trying to do this while holding this, then bend that open a little bit with a knife blade or something, a screwdriver. So because this one here has to slide into it. So if you can see, that tab goes underneath, the one going in there, and then this goes in like that, just like that. So that's not a perfect point right there, but it's really close once it's all together. And if this were ever to expand and contract, it doesn't really show like as if you just did the old button pass method, where this one here is just cut here, and then this one's just square cut down to here. Then I want to tuck that nail back in there just to hold it there to show you again, and then I'm going to take you back on the top. But now to recap, this bottom is just square cut out to here, and then this side one has the 45 on it. Then when you bring it up here to the top, so when you measure this where the actual window is, that's where your notch starts on this one. Then you make a notch on this one and break it off completely and just run it like you did the bottom, run it past. So do that on both sides. And then this top, you want your long point on your 45s to be out with this edge. And then see how that tucks in just like that, and it slides inside there. Yeah, so that's how I do that. And everything, I cut the face to this, and everything I was cutting 1.5 inches long on the back just to give it extra protection back there. This one I cut a little bit shorter because when I fit this in later, these have to be a tad bit shorter. But for a normal window that you're not going to be pulling it off and putting it in place like I have to do with this one, then you would just cut it 1.5 inches long there. At least in my case, because this distance here, this is 1 inch and this is 2.5 back here. That's what the 1.5 inches comes into. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that's a little bit long-winded, but just to kind of give you an idea, since I didn't get any footage of me actually doing it because it was so spread out and sporadic and long winter. But this will hopefully kind of explain the basics of it. And then I'll try to find a good video, like I said, and I'll share it, a link of it down in the video description if I can find one.
Okay guys, so that video that I talked about, there's a whole playlist from Mr. Postframe on YouTube, and he does a lot of good installs on steel siding, so I'm going to link him down in the video description below the video for you. And then also, this is going to be the next video in the series, is installing the garage door. It's going to be a long one, but I'm going to try to go through the whole process of installing the Midland garage doors that I put in here. So be on the lookout for that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and we'll get you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.